according to your bio here, that you invent fun future things in collaboration with amazing colleagues at Unity Technologies, and your
Oh,
job
yes.
there is head of consumer augmented reality, which sounds like a great gig.
It
And I
is,
looked at
yeah.
your bio. Yeah, I looked at your bio. There's tons of really great things you've done, like in terms of like just working with a lot of different technologies and working with art installations and visualization of things. And also there's this whole side of you with the quantum computing thing you're interested in and working on. But let's start, just tell us a little bit about you for people who don't know you.
Sure, yeah. I started coding when I was pretty young. This will make me sound even more ancient than I am, on an old Apple II Plus, an old hand-me-down 1979 Steve Wozniak special. A big love for that machine and Woz. But I was really like a art, design, music kid. And so when I went to college, I ended up studying graphic design and majoring in fine art, which must have seemed pretty surprising to some folks around me, given how much I was doing with computers. But at that moment, it wasn't so cool to have a foot in both worlds. With all the art students, I was a little on the tech side, and it didn't make a lot of sense. And with all the real engineers, folks who are actually studying computer science and solving real algorithmic problems and things, I was kind of the strange art kid. So now, though, it really blows me away. Now that's accepted and promoted, and so I'm very happy and a little bit jealous to see kids growing up now where that's just how it is. So I suppose that's the happiest outcome you could ask for, right?
Right. So I mean, this whole user experience driven world we're moving into more and more, where the user experience is kind of central to the way you design interactions with your applications, as opposed to throwing a bunch of requirements over the shelf and saying, here, do these things this business person thought up in a cube. It really does kind of enable that kind of pivotal role between like the tech world and the design world and art world. So it's really interesting. But you've gone even further than that. You've done things like a digital Rubik's Cube with the creator, right? How'd you walk into that one?
I kind of fell into that one. I was doing other projects at Google Creative Lab. This is now going back almost 10 years. Mm-hmm. And I think I was wrapping up a few really fun things, or I was nearing the end, enough that I was starting to look around, and I saw there's this guy who's doing really cool 3D stuff in browser using just style sheets. And I'd started to use 3JS, and in fact, the projects I was wrapping up were 3D browser-based games that Google was putting out there for, let's say, advertising purposes, marketing purposes.
Like everything they do.
And I realized I didn't know anything about CSS 3D. It was just a blind spot, and I wanted to pick it up. So I started experimenting with it. And I have this long-running obsession with Rubik's Cubes. A good friend of mine had learned how to solve them. And I love this buddy of mine, but I never thought like he is a closet genius. And we've always had that friendly competition. And I was like, during the recession in like 2008, all the freelance stuff dried up, and I taught myself how to solve Rubik's Cubes just by watching like YouTube tutorials over and over again. Folks who really know what they're doing know that I'm using the least efficient, simplest method. But folks who don't know how to solve a Rubik's Cube, it looks magical, but it's once you learn the tricks, it's slightly less magical. Mm-hmm. So I had taught myself how to solve Rubik's Cubes using the layer method. And I was in Creative Lab, and I was messing around with CSS 3D, and I decided to start making a CSS 3D Rubik's Cube. And I thought this was a fun way to exercise that skill and get to learn it. And I started showing it around, and I found out there was in progress already a collaboration with Erno Rubik on a traveling exhibition. And I immediately got pulled into the project. I ended up, finishing that Rubik's Cube and creating a code, like a library for it, so people could make their own versions of it, which we gave away for free. And in the process, yes, I got to meet Erno himself, which was fantastic. And Erno approved of my digital cube, so it was very, very satisfying. But the funniest part was he came in to Creative Lab one day, and I think at that point it was, let's say 80 employees, something like that. And everyone knew that he was coming in, and they ran out to buy Rubik's Cubes so that he could sign them. Which, sure. This guy, I love Erno. He's an old school architect. He's a curmudgeon. He likes his coffee black and his cigarettes. It's like he walked straight out of the 70s. And I just, I'd give him a hug, but he'd hate that, which
right, yeah.
Also, he's fantastic. So he gets surrounded by folks who want their Rubik's Cube signed, or he calls it his cube. and they're new, they haven't been used. So he takes a Sharpie and he signs his name on them. Within about 10 seconds, someone accidentally brushes against it, and his signature rubs right off. And I was a little bit proud, but as being a little bit of a smartass, I reached into my backpack and I pulled out a very scuffed up, well-loved cube. And I was like, maybe this will work because it doesn't have that gloss on it anymore. And he kind of smiled, because he immediately, you can tell who actually, enjoys his toys or not, or puzzles. And the problem was it was mixed up. I pulled it out of my bag and it was shuffled. And so there I am in front of Erno, and I have to solve the cube so that he can sign it. No pressure.
No pressure at all, yeah.
No pressure. How fast can I do it, without messing up? But yeah, that was really great. And that digital Rubik's Cube became the basis for the branding for that traveling exhibition. And I saw they reused it. Erno put out, it's not a memoir. He writes it from the perspective of the cube for the most part, which is very, very interesting. But it became the cover of that book as well. So, and I say, this is me, it's not me, it was a team of really, I keep coming back to this, great collaborations, team of great folks that I was working with, who all contributed and made this stuff happen.
Yeah, you said a lot in your bio too, that it's not just you, it's like working with people to kind of, stir things up and get creative, but I guess your favorite thing to do is collaborate with others, right?
And I think it's also a bit of a reaction. I mean, I do still love like building things solo to start with and then sharing them, sort of like the magician's reveal, or like a composer working on a piece and then finally getting to play it for their friends. But I think when I was coming up, and I don't know if this is across the board or just, in the kind of bubble I was in, there's this real myth of like the solo genius, like sitting alone in their studio with their deep thoughts. And like, sure, you got to find time to concentrate and figure out some things on your own, but then you need to take that somewhere and bounce it off actual human beings other than yourself. And so it may be a bit of a reaction against that kind of thinking.
One thing that really caught my eye, and you probably get asked this way too much, is the LCD sound system thing. How'd you get involved with that? And what did you exactly do there?
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I was getting into VR pretty early, and the web has been the thing that I'm attracted to for a long time. It's such a great medium for just sharing stuff, getting things out there, especially in raw form, because you can always tweak it as you go. So it's fine to publish early. And so I'd started playing with special builds of Chrome that had an early version of the WebVR API. I was at Google, and I was getting interested in this stuff, and ended up getting in touch with Brandon Jones, who is one of the guys on the W3C standards board for WebVR, now WebXR, but same thing. And he was making these special builds. And so I got a hold of that. This other guy, Boris, was making some scaffolding code, and really, really got into early web-based virtual reality. A few months later, I think it was a few months later, I ended up working with the Google Data Arts team, which is has a fantastic history. That's another great group of folks. And they were looking to make something that was web-based virtual reality. They have a history of doing collaborations with bands to make web-based music videos. Like if you've ever seen Wilderness Downtown, Arcade Fire has done a few collaborations with the data arts team. And these were like the little ingredients in the kitchen. And when everything finally settled, we were working with LCD Sound System. They had a really cool track that they wanted to release as part of their upcoming album and promotion for it. And yeah, we started moving from there. Yeah, Jonathan Puckey, Studio Moniker, those are the two headlining names. They're fantastic folks, a fantastic group of people. And then I'm lumped in under the data arts team, which is another great group of people. And for that, my focus was really, one of my obsessions was making hand controller code that was modular, that you could just add to your project, and it would work with like Rift controllers and Vive controllers and Daydream. And I think at the time there was also a Gear VR controller. So you could write really generic code saying, when you aim and you use the primary button, that should be an interaction. And it would figure out, where in the buttons array the primary button might be, and what's the threshold for a trigger interaction and things like that. So it would do all that for you. And so I think in the end, I got to touch different parts, but I think that was my main contribution to the project, which I also then reused when I made Space Rocks, which sadly no longer works because it was based on the early version of the WebVR API. But it was basically, I love Atari games, and it was asteroids, but in virtual reality.
That's great stuff. I had a question here, but I think I might already kind of answer it myself. But I'm 53. My kids are in their 20s. They've got their Oculus Rifts and things like that. So I think they've got the virtual reality world sewn in that I've never used, which it seems like that's a lot of where VR is in kind of headset-based 3D games. But augmented reality is really kind of taking off a lot on phones, especially like, I was going to grab my iPhone and look, it's an iPhone. But well, with the iPhone, like just last night, I was sitting in my backyard, and I looked up and I'm like looking at all the planes, and I said, there's got to be an app. There's got to be an app where you can hold it up. Coolest thing in the world. You just like, put your phone in the sky and you see the lights, and they're floating. Like, here's this particular plane going to, Toronto or whatever else. What do you think is on the edge in terms of augmented reality, that where we could take this?
Well, first I would say for me, and for right now within Unity, we're using, it's a bit confusing for the industry, I suppose. We're using augmented reality really in two ways: the traditional like mobile phone-based augmented reality, and then in the way that Magic Leap uses it to mean immersive, like glasses or headset-based AR. Whereas, Microsoft would term that mixed reality. And, give us enough time and maybe we'll flip back and forth. I feel like it's still, I have this theory that on a long enough timeline, it will just all be called VR, in the same way that, we had a telephone and a fax line and a landline and, a cellular phone, mobile phone, smartphone. In the end, we just say phone. It's a phone. What's your phone number? If we even ask anymore. So yeah, we're talking about immersive augmented reality, and you're asking where it's going. That's like the billion-dollar question.
I know, right?
Multi-billion-dollar question. But I think eventually, at some point, it seems like at first augmented reality headsets or glasses, if you want to be super lightweight, may work in an ecosystem with your phone, with your smartphone that you have on you. And one example is the Nreal glasses, which literally just plug into a phone for power and for software. So when you're done with it, you can, they probably don't recommend this, you can just yank the cable out instead of like shutting the glasses down or doing anything like that. Because the brains, have you ever had your TV crash? Like, that's a weird, yeah. It's, the future is weird. So at first there may be some sort of environment of networked things, but I think far enough down the line, the phone disappears because it would just be this extra device that you're carrying around with you in your pocket or somewhere else you have to keep track of, versus a pair of glasses that are just on your face and sorted out of the way because of that. And at some point, It could be, especially with edge computing, things like that, where a lot of the computation is offloaded your personal device. It's just happening near you. It could be that your typical desktop machine or laptop goes away. And you may have a physical keyboard because that real object and tactile feedback is quite nice. Physical mouse or trackpad, maybe. But why would you need screens? And if you can handle the computation elsewhere, why would you want this thing on your desk or under your desk? And then, the world is kind of your oyster. You can you can take your whatever computation tasks or spreadsheets, emails, things like that, and it's around you whenever you need them, or you just put them away when you don't need them. Without all the extra baggage.
Let's talk a little bit about your interest in quantum computing, just at a high level. I know your talk is about Q.js and about quantum computing, but you have Q.js as a library. How did you get involved in that?
Well, I could sort of relate it to the title, which immediately I had regrets when I submitted my title. But so I was calling it, or am calling it, quantum computing for hapless dreamers. And that hapless dreamer part it's a bit self-deprecating, because that's kind of how I was made to feel in school at times, or when trying to focus on certain projects. And if we were to flip it around and not be the self-deprecating version, if it were just to be the positive version, it's that I feel like I see a lot of good connections between different genres of things, between different subjects, different sorts of projects. And that is exactly how I ended up in quantum computing. I always thought quantum physics sounded really cool. The idea that reality only renders itself on demand, superposition, entanglement, all this stuff sounded really magical. But I'm not a physicist, I'm not an engineer. I'd watch videos and lectures on this stuff, but it didn't all fit in. But what I had been doing is I had been doing a lot of 3D work, and I've been dabbling in machine learning stuff. And what those two things have in common, and you don't see it on the surface at first, but you're really just shuffling around matrices, right? You're just multiplying and tensoring matrices. And that's how you're doing all your 3D transforms, and that's how you're progressing in your learning models. And it turns out that that's really how you think about or simulate quantum computers. In fact, it's even simpler, because the matrices are, I was going to say smaller. They get exponentially bigger as you compute, but they're simpler. Like a qubit is only a 2-value matrix. That's it. It's just a pair of numbers. That's all a qubit is. And sorry, I should back up and say quantum bit is a qubit. I forget. Yes. Sometimes I use jargon. And it really started with this lecture that I saw from a guy, Andrew, I forget his last name, but he's at Microsoft, or was at Microsoft at the time. And he did this lecture titled after one of his favorite books about the subject, Quantum Computing for Computer Scientists. And when I saw that, and I saw that it's just matrices, and if you're using the gate model of quantum computing, it's really that you're just multiplying matrices together that contain complex numbers, and each one of those little buzzwords was like a rung on the ladder that I could climb. And I thought, I love web browsers. I bet I could just do this in the browser. And that's what I did. I got working on Q.js and just building the scaffolding for being able to build quantum circuits. And once I had the actual computation in place, I started obsessing over building a drag and drop interface for composing those quantum circuits. So that's a long way to say I got there by doing 3D stuff and then realizing there's a connection between these two worlds.
But it's very cool. Like, I was just hacking around a little tiny bit with it to prepare for the interview, and looking at some videos. I was like, one of them was interesting. It was the IBM person. She had describing
Dr. Talia Gershon.
Yes. For 5 different levels of people, from a child all the way up to a doctoral thesis student, right? So and I was realizing as I got further and further away, I'm like, oh, you got to do complex numbers and math. I'm more like you. I'm a creative type that likes to program, and I've always been more on the less mathematical side of it myself personally, and I'm not sure where your math skills were, but mine were never the best. But I'm looking at that going, wow, it seems like the interface for it is really great. Like you can visualize kind of the swim lanes and the steps, the different time slices. But then I really love that you spent time in the console, making the console look really, really good and visualizing things in character UI, which I think is really tremendous. I think it's really great. Kind of moving between like the string version of things where you get the multiple lines, the dashes or whatever, and then visualize it for me. Okay, here's a block diagram. Okay, so from there, maybe I want to put this in the DOM and put it over there. And, and then I can transform and show runs of things. And you have this nice little grayscale, each of these different steps, what the outcome was. For people who are interested, you should really check it out. Q.js is very cool. How long did it take you to put that thing together? Has it been a labor of love for a couple of years, or
it's
really
been
getting stuff done?
It's hard to gauge how long it took, because I've forgotten over time how long it took me to get a really good working model of it together with the drag and drop interface. But yeah, it's been like a nights and weekends project. And right now, the stuff that I've been playing with isn't even visible because I haven't been posting it to the repo, but I'm playing with the new web GPU compute API so that we could do some pretty good hardware acceleration. Again, that connection between 3D graphics and simulating quantum computing. A GPU, its job is meant to do matrix math really, really efficiently, and tons of little calculations in parallel. So it's basically meant to simulate quantum computers, in my opinion. So I'm excited about that. Also, there are tons of little things, features missing, little bugs, gremlins that I know about that I'd be very excited to finally polish up and put out for the world. Sorry, what was, now I've gotten derailed.
I'm not sure what the question was anymore, because I'm just like, I want to play with this stuff. I guess the thing is, we kind of need to do this because if you think about it, like a quantum computer is a liquid nitrogen chilled bottle with a CPU at the bottom or the chip at the bottom with the qubits in it, that it's like absolute zero just about. So it's not like you can lug one of these things around in your backpack, but are we at like the Babbage computer level of learning about quantum computing? Are we ENIAC-ish?
Oh, yeah, totally. I'm pretty sure that within the lifetime of young folks right now, quantum computers will absolutely change the world. In the same way that, you have your like early Babbage machines, right? Or like the bombs. And now we carry these supercomputers around in our pocket and we don't even think about it. The amount of computational power in this is insane. Will everyone have quantum computers in their pocket? I don't think so, but I think they'll probably be cheap enough and ubiquitous enough, to have, I don't know, maybe people will have them in their home. That seems weird, but like in an edge computing case or something like that, where it's like, oh yeah, we'll do a quantum search on that massive amount of data, and that'll be a very efficient way to find what we're looking for. I think that'll happen in the next 30 to 60 years. In the nearer term, there'll be government use cases, there'll be commercial use cases. But yeah, in the same way that we just don't even care about the massive amount of computational power in our pockets, that will come to pass in just a few decades.
Very cool.
But
we're looking for, go ahead.
The one last thing I wanted to add is when I was working on some of this stuff, I was still at Amazon and they were starting to ramp up Bracket and all of that. So I'd actually built demos where I was injecting Q.js into Bracket's Jupyter-based notebooks. And you could use just the drag and drop interface, and it was writing the actual Bracket Python code. And then you just hit play and it runs it on real quantum hardware. So Q.js itself is a JavaScript library that just runs in your browser. But you can absolutely use it to drive real quantum computation on real quantum hardware. And, I was just doing simple like coin flips, entanglement stuff, but it was still really cool just to know that it was actually happening for real.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we're looking forward to your talk. You're in the first tranche of people after the keynote at 10:15 a.m. on Tuesday. So looking forward to seeing you speak about quantum computing. And again, the title of your talk again was, I'm sorry.
Quantum computing for hapless dreamers. So hopefully that makes folks smile and question a bit.
We can't
and want to come hear
ourselves. We're too serious, you know? All right. Stewart, it's been great meeting you, and thank you very much for speaking to ET this year.
Thank you so much. All right. I'll see you soon.
Yep. Take care.